Good afternoon and welcome to our weekly Wednesday creativity workshop with Adobe Education. Today is Wednesday, October 2nd, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Adobe Education leader Shelley Rodrigo, who is joining us from Mesa Community College as a residential faculty member. And today Shelley is going to be sharing designing Adobe Creative Cloud micro lessons to share with faculty. So thanks, Shelley, so much for joining us today.
Thank you, and I will first clarify. I'm actually now at the University of Arizona, but I did teach at Mesa for 9 years, and I've been here at U of A. I'm in my 5th year, but actually I will bring something up in relation to my community college experience and friends there. So thank you today. I wanted to share with you my experiences that I've been having for the past 9 months working with faculty and Adobe Creative Cloud. So this is contact information, and I will, at the end of these slides, have a shortened URL for everyone to get access to the slides. So micro lessons, but very quickly some friends and colleagues and I came up with the more fun and appealing term of Adobe Appetizers. So that's kind of the retitling of this is working with faculty with Adobe Appetizers, and I do want to thank Cheryl Colin at Glendale Community College, one of the sister community colleges to Mesa, who made this beautiful art piece and then shared it with me because it's amazing. So the problem that I'm excited to share with you, and we'll see whether you all share some of that problem with me. The problem is, but before we do the problem, let's see who you are and see if you have the same problem that I have. So if you wouldn't mind in the chat, quickly put in there who you are, and by who you are, I'm like, what exactly do you teach? And so Clara, since I can't see the chat, could you shout out a few of those as people?
Definitely. So a lot of great feedback already. Love the logo, and I love the concept.
Isn't the logo amazing? I can't claim that.
Yeah, so waiting for people to post in the chat. So Erica says she teaches all of the Adobe products along with web classes and design principles. So okay, Erica Blue, cool. Thanks for joining. Emily Kinsky says she teaches university courses in our communications department, media design, new media, PR, and research.
And so Emily, do you teach Adobe as part of those?
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
And Jurgen says that he is teaching Photoshop and Illustrator in CS5. I know he also has access to the Creative Cloud suite through the Adobe Education Leaders program, since Jurgen is an Adobe Education Leader. And then Georgina, who's joining us from Jordan, says she is a director of learning technology supporting the rollout of Adobe across K-12 and teach 6 hours of creative media in high school.
Cool, creative media. Georgina, did I meet you in San Francisco? I'm wondering. Yes. Sorry, I'm asking these questions and I can't see the chat.
Okay, cool. No, it's all good. Yes, so Georgina was in San Francisco. Yeah.
Cool.
She says hi. And then let's see, Suzanne, who's joining us from Israel, says she's a designer. So she's not currently teaching.
Okay.
And then Rosanna, who's joining us, says that she is teaching Premiere, Illustrator, Photoshop for 19 years.
Wonderful. You fit into the category I like to say is you've forgotten more about the applications than some of the new teachers have ever known. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing who you are and what you teach, because that gets into kind of my situation. So my follow-up question to you all, and again, if you can just give a thumbs up or a yes or no, have you all helped fellow faculty, or in the case of the designer, other teachers, teach Adobe applications or multimedia production? So because you do it and you understand it, do they come to you and ask for help?
So we're getting some feedback in the chat here. Georgina says, yes, regular training. Erica Bloom says, yes and yes.
Yep. So what's always interesting to me is, and I'm hoping a few more yeses are rolling in, is those of us who specialize in various technology um, things related to education, we pick up side responsibilities like helping our colleagues and do these technology things. So who am I? Unlike you all, I don't teach, I don't, when I teach classes, I'm not specifically teaching the Adobe apps as kind of core to my class, except for this one last class I did last year. But that's very rare for me. I'm in a department of English. I primarily teach writing or teach others on how to teach writing. But what I also have done my entire career is help faculty, either faculty across the discipline, so in all the other disciplines, either I've helped them use teaching with technology or writing in their classes. And so in this instance, what I what do I teach is both students in terms of writing and teaching writing, but also faculty in terms of using technology in their classes. And that brings me back to what I'm situating as the problem. So the problem is when teaching Adobe applications is not the purpose of the course. So my guess is when you all are helping other faculty, a lot of the cases those faculty may not be teaching, teaching Photoshop is not the core mission of the class. Or like in those communication classes, I think my guess is there's a spectrum, that there's some that it's a lot of communication theory and praxis and maybe a little bit of multimedia production, but then there's probably some where no, a lot of the class is learning how to do video. And I'm just kind of projecting a little bit there. But I know that's kind of the case with journalism, graphic design, all of them have that. But there's both the theory, but a lot of cases what you're teaching is these things. But then we have folks, so I work with folks in the sciences, history. I've got folks in library studies on how are they using Adobe applications. So how do we help them balance learning the Adobe applications, both the faculty and their students. And in this case, their students learning the applications with learning course content. So back to that lovely visual, I have to share it with you all because Cheryl rocks and it's beautiful. This idea of Adobe Appetizers. And just kind of the idea there is thinking small. A lot of our Adobe applications, even the easier ones, like Adobe Rush, Spark, the learning curve, I will confess, is next to nothing. But even like Rush, there is a learning curve there. It is a big and beefy application. And then when you move on to things like Premiere Pro or InDesign or Photoshop, those are huge. And so in working with, back to that problem, working with faculty that this is not a core part of their courses, let's give them and their students small bites to help work with it. So in working with faculty, this is kind of the metaphor that we've come up with. And I just want to share with you how we're structuring those, share with you some of those, and then share with you kind of a graphic organizer and a template if you build your own. When you continue, it sounds like a lot of you work with faculty, and this might be a way to help doing that type of support work. So what is it? What's in it? First is trying to get them to produce a recognizable genre. So the Adobe Appetizers, so now I'm going to ask, are you all seeing the Google Doc? I just want to make sure the link worked.
Yep, we're seeing everything perfectly.
Cool. Nope, just want to make sure. So in this case, the Appetizer is developing a profile picture. I can specifically tell you this one emerged from, I had a faculty member in the classics department. No, it was religious studies, and she was doing a general education class in using mythologies throughout different world frameworks and the theme of love, and I can't remember exactly the class, but all that to say is the assignment, she wanted students to translate pieces of a mythological text into text messaging, but she also wanted them to make the profile picture for the text message, and it had to, again, at this point we're talking about classical Greek, Egyptian, other mythologies, gods, goddesses, characters, and then they had to make the profile pic. And so this particular micro lesson is just getting them used to, it's like, how do you get into Photoshop? How do you do very basic things? How do you maybe use that healing brush to touch something up? How do you resize the image? And how do you export something? Very small, but very basic, and it's basic steps that the students will need to use if they want to do something even more advanced in Photoshop. So again, a bite-sized appetizer, small piece, and recognizable genre. Now, I'm also say recognizable genre, um, uh, in this case, spot color that students, so in the upper right-hand corner, oh, I want view, come on. In the upper right-hand corner is kind of the resulting, that students know what it means to have a black and white picture with just a spot of color in it and are excited to potentially learn how to do that. So a recognizable genre. Similarly, a mashup, and in this case specifically a layered mashup of putting something on, having something pop out between letters. So whether it's a whole world and a word, sorry, whole world. It could be a world as well, a globe. But a letter. In this case, it's the Arizona University of Arizona A, or a word. But again, this is a known genre. They're used to seeing this and making it very small, very precise things that they can produce. And similarly, I'm not linking out because it's what I actually have to build. You'll see the beginnings of it later, but a portfolio in XD. So again, students know what portfolios, or faculty know what portfolios are. So the most important thing is, I think, is making these not only bite-sized, but whatever they're producing as part of that lesson is something that they recognize at the end. This is something I know what it is. I know what I can do with it. Then they're all focused on learning objectives, but the learning objectives, a lot of times, again, we're thinking in terms of the content, and it could have that too, but at this, trying to break down what are the things that are happening in this case, both of these sets of learning objectives for different ones are about Photoshop. What are the types of steps or things that they're learning how to do in Photoshop? And again, by keeping it small, they can learn little pieces at a time. But for example, we know that this is the two ones that you saw previously. We know that just understanding how to import things in, to crop them, resize them, use the healing brush tool, those are all useful for later. And then in this later one, we know that the heart and soul of Photoshop is understanding layers and masks, and selecting and know how to inverse and that kind of stuff. And so letting them, brushes isn't this activity, but that's also obviously a heart and soul. But trying to tease these apart and teach these key components as separate pieces that later in more complex projects they might build them together. But so focused, producing a focused genre, having very specific, especially learning objectives associated with the Adobe application. And then really important, because again, reminding that this is for faculty who may not know these applications, and I fit in that category. I was explaining to someone before this started that I'm actually really intimidated about going to Adobe Max because I do not know these applications well. So here, what we're seeing, this walkthrough steps, very detailed steps. And then ideally, I will say this, ideally there'd be a video, but detailed steps showing both the faculty member and the students what they will be doing in that activity. So that was, and this is another set. So this is about kind of building a template. This one's about building a template in InDesign that students then fill out. And again, so it walks through how to work through basic pieces in InDesign to fill in the blanks for a templated section. Because again, the point is not necessarily that the faculty member needs to understand how to build a template in design. They might be able to get help from someone like yourselves, or the student necessarily now needs to do that from start. But still, if they get in there and they can start managing basic things of how to edit the text, how to move the text, how to edit images or resize images in InDesign, they're slowly learning the application, and it's not overwhelming the student or the faculty member in regards to that this course is about something else, about religious studies, about political science, about I have a science class that's about dinosaurs. Really excited about that one. See how that faculty member's doing. I'm going to pause for a second and just ask, are there any questions that popped up in the chat that I'm not seeing?
Taking a look at the chat here. And so first off, really excited for Adobe Max, and some good news is we'll be having different breakout sessions. So it'll be a lot of different hands-on workshops, and so don't feel intimidated. It's going to be amazing in that component, and so excited to have you. So a couple quick questions here. So Rosanna says, very interesting. Jürgen says, great. Jürgen questions, does your school provide this as curriculum on its homepage?
So I'm not 100% understanding the question, but I'm going to start babbling. And if I don't answer what you're looking for, if you could write in, revise the question, and maybe I'll get there. So in this instance, University of Arizona is an Adobe Creative Cloud campus. So meaning all of the students do have access to the Creative Cloud. And so part of what we're doing in this instance is there's obviously faculty like most of yourselves who are attending synchronous right now, that this is part of what you teach. And so when this happened, they were excited because the students no longer have to say buy Photoshop to participate in this class. The institution is, they get it through the site license. However, part of what we're trying to do is acknowledge that we want, in the name of creative literacies, digital literacies, we'd like to see students using these applications and working more multimodally in classes that are not traditional multimodal or multimedia classes. And so this is kind of an initiative of working with faculty in other disciplines to build either small or, replace like the research paper with multimodal projects in their classes. It's not explicit. Well, hold on. What we do have, I can share this. Adobe.arizona.edu does talk about Adobe at our campus and its use. So that, I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were wanted or if that got at some of that, but I'm happy to continue babbling if I miss stuff.
No, that sounds great. And I think it was more of also how how University of Arizona is promoting any of the curriculum. But I'm also
okay. Yeah. I will say this right now. There's not. For example, we have a program for engagement. So thinking of like community engagement and stuff like that, where courses are tagged. Right now, we do not have a program that tags a course saying students will get multimedia experience. That doesn't happen. The students really don't know unless they somehow got information about the specific course in advance. Otherwise, they show up the first day and go, oh, in this history class, I'm going to make a video instead of writing a report. So if that's what you're wondering, no, we don't. We don't have them tagged that way yet.
I know that's helpful to share from the University of Arizona side. I also just posted a landing page on how to become a creative campus. So this is relatively new that we're sharing here in the States. Actually, we've had this program in Australia for the last couple of months. I actually just visited Swinburne University last week, which is also a creative campus. So it's really amazing to see all of the different components that these campuses are putting together. So if you're interested, I have that landing page there. And then I'm looking at other questions. Georgina says, Emily first says, you'll love Max, Shelley. Georgina says, it doesn't matter how expert you are or not, you have great ideas to share and everyone can learn something new. What's great about Adobe Education Leaders.
I love our positiveness in this. This is fabulous.
Yes. And then Claudia from Brazil asks, how long does it take to make teachers become engaged with this content to learn?
That's a great question. My experience comes primarily from doing WAC or writing across the curriculum workshops, where the idea is helping faculty, again, in other disciplines incorporate more writing assignments, traditional alphabetic text writing in their assignments. And in both, the event I'm doing here with Adobe is modeled off of that. And in this case, the faculty I'm working with are doing 4 half-day workshops, so 3.5-hour sessions. And I'll be honest though, all those, even though they dabble in some of the applications, all they're still really getting is an idea of what some of the applications do, time and energy to think about how they might, assign something like a static image instead of a short paragraph of text, or how they might assign a video instead of, a research argument or something like that. And in doing that, both going like, okay, does it meet the outcomes of the assignment, but also then how does that change how I have to support the students in producing this, and how does it even change how I have to how the assignment's submitted, and that actually comes later in this presentation. But the four half days. I think a lot of it is about getting faculty to reimagine pieces of their courses in creative ways, and then start thinking about how to change that. Does it prepare them wholeheartedly? No. I have a graduate student teaching assistant who's working with me on this project, and both of us meet with some of the faculty and help them reimagine things like the one I showed you on the profile. Pick was specifically made for that religious studies faculty because that's what she needed for her and her students to work through that particular assignment, and before Friday. And so it's one of the things I was promised I would post in the Adobe Facebook group under this announcement once it's made, is an XD portfolio kind of template. So those are still building and still supporting them. It's kind of I think to really help them do well, it's a little bit of a continuing support, because for a lot of these faculty, it's a little bit of an overwhelming. They've never done something like this in their class before. It's always been write this essay, write this paragraph, that kind of stuff. I hope that gets at some of that answer. Well, do you want me to kind of keep going for a little while longer and we'll pause for questions again?
He says yes, oh. Capital Y, yes.
Yeah,
perfect.
No.
Yeah, let's go ahead and
okay.
Keep going.
Okay, so ended on that detailed steps, and I'm sure you're not surprised for that. This, and actually, thank you. This was perfect. I'll pay you later. This is one of the biggest things in working with faculty, is getting them to think about doing this as scaffolding. So not only are these small activities building towards scaffolding if they want students to produce a bigger multimedia project. So like you saw a handful of different Photoshop ones that by the time someone was done with all those Photoshop micro lessons or Adobe Appetizers, they would actually know a good chunk of working in Photoshop and might be able to, get a little creative. But also getting them to think about scaffolding, that when asking students to do new technologies, that we might be asking them before they begin, hey, go watch these basic videos on Photoshop. And when I assign this, so like that first one where it says 1 up top, I show them like, there's the minutes. And then I'm like, here, let me show you how to play these videos at 1.5 or 2 the speed if you want to speed this up some. And then similarly, this other tips underneath is for a video, and giving them tips that in theory, students might already understand, that if they're doing research, they have to go to the library and they have to find materials and they have to take notes, and they have some ideas how to do that, but they might not have ideas on how they should prepare and collect stuff to make a video. And so again, providing scaffolded instructions as well to kind of help both, again, the faculty and the students. So those of you who teach media production, you you already think in terms of, oh, the students are going to have to collect a bunch of assets before they start putting it together. And again, a lot of other faculty do, especially if they assign something like a research paper. They're like, oh, well, of course the students have to go do research, and they have to have collected data from secondary sources and maybe collected data from primary sources, but they're not used to thinking of it in terms of media pieces. And so that's part of helping both the faculty and the students both see that this is not radically new, but also it is slightly different, or we might use different terms for it. So like, for research, we collect data, secondary and primary. For, media, a lot of times we're talking in terms of assets, but it's the same stuff, right? Collecting your pieces before you put it together. And then as far as also the scaffolding, the learning, I'm really excited about in-app learning, and this is what I was just telling you. So right now I'm trying to build kind of like use the in-app learning of XD and adapting it to build an in-app template for a portfolio, and that's exactly what I was telling you about doing. So again, it's scaffolding, right? It's building the steps, helping both the faculty and the students through a scaffolded process that hopefully also gets them producing. In this instance, it's like, here, I want you to learn XD, but you're also going to produce a portfolio, and it's going to be a branded one as part of the process. And so we're, as thinking of these or building these, thinking about the amazing in-app learning opportunities. Like in Photoshop, I love that all the little tools have the little instructions, descriptions and videos. Premiere Pro has that great starter package of videos. Those are all amazing things to, again, help use as scaffolding for both the faculty and the students. Now, this is submission guidelines is usually a big deal for a lot of faculty. They're not used to thinking in those terms, in the sense that if you are asking your students to submit video, you can't have them upload the video to your course management or learning management system. There's not enough space there. Similarly, if, asking students to do like profile type images, that you might be creative and get them to submit them in places like the representative image in their learning management system. We use Desire to Learn, that's what D2L means, or in their Google account or something like that. So all that to say is a lot of faculty, they don't think in terms of their assignment prompt including submission guidelines, because you turn in a paper by stapling it and turn it in. A lot now we turn it in but by uploading it, but it can be different with multimedia, and helping faculty think that through. The biggest thing, and by no means am I an expert, but one of the biggest things that a lot of faculty really start to get worried about is, well, how am I going to assess this? I don't know what makes a good video or a good photo or a good, composite image. How do I assess this? And so part of what we try to include of these is rubric ideas. I do not want to claim that these are the definitive ways to talk about how a faculty member might assess this media. But here, so one, we're trying to get them to think about in terms of, well, there's the content or the situation that you're asking students to engage with. And so this is that piece for faculty where it's like, yeah, you're not just asking them to make a video, but you're asking them to make a video about whatever the topic of your class is. But you can do things like say specific, is the video focused in the same way you can ask, is a paper focused? Does it have a specific obvious point or message? Does it have a thesis statement, right? I mean, that's the same stuff. And does the editing or the shot composition emphasize that topic or message? So you can still ask, to emphasize content. But then, like I said, what people are usually worried about are, well, I don't know how to assess the art part, the design part. And so here, or creativity, we've got, even if it's like, did they follow the instructions or did they try to adapt and adopt and push things? That's a way to think about creativity. And similarly, digital literacy, if they used multiple images, did they require citations? We can ask that in a video as well. Did they have credits at the end that talked about where the music or where images came from? And then finally, or have the information literacy. So you saw that. And again, you could potentially, submission in itself becomes a part of the rubric. So for example, we have told folks that if it's really important that you want to understand like this particular activity was a composite and you want to see that they used layers and stuff like that, then you might want them to submit the entire Adobe Photoshop file. But then that gets back to, but you don't want them uploading that file in the LMS. It's too big. It needs to sit somewhere else. And so that's back to that submission guidelines. And that might be part of both the instructions and the rubric. We try in these to also, because the idea with these are lesson plans that we draft, and our idea is that the faculty member will adopt and adapt as needed. That they shouldn't be able to completely use it cold turkey, but maybe just with very little adoption. But what we try to do is also have ideas of what they might do, what else they might do. So for example, that first at the top, the assignment genre options come from the InDesign one. So, again, it's an InDesign templated booklet, and saying, so you might template review sheets, or you might template unit and course reflections and have students do that. And then the other one is the letter with the picture behind it, going like, oh, well, you might ask students, this is also trying to get to the learning, you might get students to create concept, definitions of terms by layering the word with images behind the text in a way that helps convey what the word or the concept is. Giving ideas like that to faculty on how they might continue to use these micro activities. So not, use just primarily the functions in Photoshop or the functions wherever to do more without necessarily, again, having to learn the entire application. Okay, oops, sorry, wrong push. I got distracted by a button. Last bit of considerations. So I do want to acknowledge that learning curve is a thing. So a lot of these Adobe Appetizers emerged from us working with faculty, working with the big professional applications like Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign and Premiere Pro. And so we want to say that we acknowledge learning curve as a thing. So you might necessarily not need to do an Adobe Appetizer for, right now we don't have any for the Spark applications. And our Adobe Appetizer for Rush is actually what I call a throw the child in the deep end of the pool, where we try to show that Rush actually has such an easy learning curve. Assign an assignment of just go make a 2-minute video over the weekend, learn how easy it is. But we want to acknowledge that learning curve matters. So you might be able to have an appetizer that's actually quite big because the application is easier to learn. Again, that stress of in-app learning and building that in as a part of doing these and trying to, and a lot of the in-app learning has gotten really sophisticated. I do want to take a moment, and I want to thank a faculty member who was at the AEL Summit in San Francisco this year, who was very distraught over the idea of these being a little bit didactic in terms of just being like, you're producing this one thing and it's not leaving much space for creativity. And obviously this stuck with me and I've been thinking about it. And again, I want to remind that part of two pieces. One, part of this is getting faculty who are in classes that the core outcome of the class is not learning this application, in the same way that the core outcome of the class is not necessarily improving their writing. Now, we know if they work on this multimedia piece, or if they choose something in writing, they will most likely get better at this, but it's not, the point is it's not a writing course, or it's not a multimedia production course. And so all that to say is that for a lot of them, this is first time access into these applications, definitely for the faculty, in some cases, the students. And so didactic instruction, I think, is okay in that instance, because it's about, let's just get you in, let's get you understanding the core of how Photoshop works. And then as you work on bigger projects, you might decide to get more creative. And that's when, all of these have resource lists of like, and that's when you go to Adobe's website and there's all these amazing resources that will help you do more creative stuff. My favorite example of that is when I've taught video and I usually focus on Rush or Premiere Pro, and I always have a handful of students who are like, I really want to do this. And I'm like, have fun with InDesign. Or not InDesign, After Effects. Have fun with After Effects. Here's the, web page with all the support on After Effects. I can't wait to see your video. It's kind of at that point, that's beyond what the assignment needs, and that's what you as a student are pushing yourself on, and I want to support that, but I also as a faculty member don't need to take responsibility for knowing how to do that. So the last thing I just want to share with you all is I'm attaching to this, and again, reminder, I'm about to share the URL that links out to everything. This graphic organizer is just something, if you kind of like this idea and you're like, oh, I want to help my faculty produce this. This first half is trying to get ideas of getting you thinking through what the appetizer might be, but then down here is more of a template on what it might look like, and you can build and adapt from there. So that is the end of my presentation, and so I look forward to more questions, and then you see the shortened bit.ly URL that brings you to this presentation and gives you access to all those links.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shelley. We're getting a lot of great feedback in the chat here.
Yay!
Claudia is excited, and he will be at Max, and so is hoping to talk to you more about this in person. Georgina says, brilliant, Shelley. Emily says she loves the icon creation idea. Erica says this has been so helpful. Jurgen says, Shelley, this is such a great presentation. And Georgina says, it's super awesome, creative, integrated tool that gives educators and students options to explore different ways to learn and grow their creativity. You've given more innovative ways to help students and educators get their voice and messages out there. That's what this is all about. Keep it up. Erica says, thank you so much.
For the rest of the day.
I know, pull it up. I know, I could send it to you. And then Erica says, thank you so much. And then Jurgen says, great, Shelley. And he says the icons are very helpful for kids. And he teaches primary in Germany.
Oh, yeah, so right?
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it is I'm an English teacher. I like words. So the idea of, because there's also, just think of, you can make, I just haven't got around to making it yet, a nice Adobe Appetizer with just Illustrator, and how Illustrator allows you to play with text and stretch words and make word art. Yeah, it's a great thing to just get people playing with language.
And then, Erica Bloom just asked, can we get the link in the chat? I can just post it in there really quick. I'll post it.
I was going to say, once I close out of this, I'll happily post it.
I know, you're like,
Yeah. I'm afraid if I touch it that way, it's going to all fall apart, and I'll be bad.
Yeah, and one of the things with Bitly's, Erica, is it's case sensitive. So just make sure that that AEL is capitalized.
Correct. And just so the numbers make sense, it's today's date, 10/02/19.
Perfect.
Month, day, year, instead of day, month, year.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Shelley. And is there anything else that you want to share? I know I posted the Bitly link in here. I'm also going to post your edX profile that I have up here as well. But yeah, any other sites that folks should reference in the future?
I was going to say, to me, what is amazing about Adobe, and so, Clara and all the Adobe team, is just how much you all have between the Adobe Education Exchange and between the is it help.adobe.com? Is it that? Basic, the resources there. And just so you all know, some of our Adobe apps are based on those. Like we'll take, like you saw one of them, it had a picture of graduation and cacti. Well, we basically adapted an Adobe's instruction for showing how compositing works with images that were relevant to our student population. So sometimes the Adobe Appetizers are just looking at some of the ways that Adobe themselves break down in the instructions or in Adobe edX, break down things, and then trying to make it specific and exciting for your students and your student population and your faculty. Um, and help faculty with it. So in the same way we just did like the cacti and the students, again, I'm not kidding. I have a science instructor who does a class on dinosaurs. Getting her to think about how might she do composite pictures with certain types of dinosaurs and certain types of environments, and making appetizers that get students learning those basic um, skills.
Well, thank you again so much, Shelley. And I love the concept of Adobe Appetizers. So I took a picture and tweeted that out. I love the illustrations on that. So really
I
creative
am forever
idea.
thankful to my colleague. That's why
No,
I'm like,
and really
put your
appreciate
byline.
And I know it can be, daunting sometimes to try kind of complex software or introduce it to faculty. So you really laid it out in a way that's really intuitive. So really appreciate it.
Thank you all. I appreciate talking through this stuff with you all, and every time I do, it helps me. Your feedback, as you heard from someone in San Francisco, is always interesting in terms of getting me to rethink through what, how, why we do this. Besides the fact we love it.
No, definitely. Well, thank you so much again. And for everyone who's watching the recording, be sure to join us next Wednesday. We'll have Darren Smith, who will be joining us from Australia. And we'll actually be doing it an hour later next week. So I will send out that information. But thank you again to Shelley, and we'll see you next week.